The story begins in a deep enlightening forest. Some brainless bullies harass Jin Kazama, an ordinary young man who lives peacefully with his mother. After beating him up, one of them has the bright idea of making fun of June, Jin's mother, which provokes the young man's fury, who literally forces them to change his teeth. He was probably going to knock them out if it wasn't for his mom. The most epic waifu in the anime arrives and stops him. On the way home, June scolds him and tells him that nothing justifies hatred. She also tries to make him see that he doesn't fit in at his school because his classmates are mediocre and envious of him, since he is destined for great things. However, she scolds him again for getting carried away with anger and not using the Kazama style she worked so hard to teach him, which is why they both go out to train again. While giving him a tender beating, June again explains to his son the basics of Kazama style, besides showing him a hint of what he is capable of, leaving Jin with his mouth open and begging for his life. In the evening, while June was preparing dinner, he hears a hombre call out to Jin. On his way out, he meets the father of one of the bullies Jin beat up in the afternoon. June tells her son that he must apologize, repeating again that nothing justifies hatred towards another person, but the man does not want an apology, but wants to harm Jin with a broken bottle, so June intervenes and knocks him out with just one move. Later, while June was explaining to his son how important it is to use strength and gifts to do good, an overwhelming sound interrupts them. June looks out the window and realizes that an old enemy has come to torment them. June tells Jin not to leave for anything in the world, and to go in search of his grandfather Heihachi Mishima if she does not return from the fight. The fight between the two breaks out almost immediately, but the Aztec demon is too strong, and June's blows seem useless against him. Although she tries her best to keep the beast away from her house so that Jin is not in danger, the Aztec demon not only has enormous strength, but it is also very fast and manages to grab her by the neck. Jin can no longer bear to see his mother suffer and runs to help her, but if his mother was no match for the demon, he is even less so. However, this motivates June even more, who begins to harm the beast when he sees that Jin is in danger. Unfortunately, she performs a magnificent move and manages to subdue the Aztec demon, but she does it to sacrifice herself next to a gas pipe and explode the whole place, losing her life in the act and leaving Jin with a destroyed heart. Days later, Jin goes to a modern and gigantic company, but although a bodyguard tried to get him out, he was left with his mouth open when he heard that he is a Kazama and that he is Heihachi's grandson, which is why he immediately took the boy to his boss's office. Heihachi receives Jin with contempt and doubts that he is Jin Kazama's son, so he challenges him to a fight to prove it. After beating up Jin, Heihachi believes that Jin is a disgrace to the Kazama and does not accept him as a disciple. Jin gets angry and tells him that he doesn't need a decrepit old man to take revenge on the demon that killed his mother. Heihachi understands what happened to June and explains to Jin that this creature is called Ogre, and that he will only be able to defeat him if he allows himself to be trained by him, so he changes his mind and accepts him as a pupil. Jin is taken to Heihachi's secretary to make his suit, but as he can't stop remembering what happened with his mother, he asks her to make the suit with flames on the sides. However, the woman does not agree and takes him to Heihachi, who thinks the same, since he will be easy prey. She then takes him to train at the gym and starts beating him as soon as they get into the ring, teaching him that he should never be off guard. He also uses 2 lanterns to give him a metaphor for power to destroy and power to build, explaining that he will have to break down his knowledge of the Kazama style to adapt to the Mishima style, which is much more aggressive and frantic. The training begins, and Jin takes a tremendous beating, as he can only use his upper body to attack and defend himself. Then, Heihachi tests Jin's brute strength, seeing if he is able to break wooden pillars or blocks. Obviously, Jin fails, but Heihachi destroys each element to show him that it is possible. In the evening, Jin accompanies his grandfather to a business dinner. Heihachi had ordered a priceless talisman, but when the merchant was about to deliver it to him, he tried to charge him more money than they had agreed, so Heihachi tells Jin to put his training to the test and beat the merchant up. The merchant takes out a knife and starts to defend himself, but Jin defeats him without problems, although he does it practically against his will, reason why Heihachi scolds him, telling him that he must leave aside the pacifism of the Kazama style if he really wants to learn the Mishima style. The next day, Heihachi orders his company's scientists to study the talisman, as it is related to Ogre. Also, his secretary explains to him that several wrestlers in the world have gone missing in the past few days. Jin's training resumes, but in reverse. Now he can only use his legs. As the days go by, he builds up his grandfather's beatings and body strength, developing more and more muscle, brute strength, and agility. He even trains with Hwoarang and defeats him. Sometime later, we see that Jin already looks like Jojo's character, but he still keeps getting beaten up by his grandfather. The good part of all this is that he befriends Ling and keeps getting stronger and stronger every day. 4 years later, and with his trademark pants wrapped in flames, Jin shows up in the ring and challenges his grandfather. Obviously, Heihachi doesn't underestimate Jin and goes all out during the fight. However, Jin finally manages to break his grandfather's guard and brings him to his knees with a vicious attack. After defeating Heihachi, Jin breaks the stone lantern that Heihachi had used for the metaphor at the beginning, and seeing the red color in his eyes, he understands that he is finally ready to carry out the Tekken tournament. Weeks later, Jin travels to Peru to meet Heihachi's secretary and prepare for the tournament, which will take place in 2 days. In addition, he meets some other participants who will travel with him to the stadium. On the way, Jin sees several videos of an edition of the tournament in which his grandfather faced the mysterious Kazuya Mishima, who is so much talked about since he was supposedly murdered. Hwoarang tells Jin that there was never anything like the violent fight between Heihachi and Kazuya, and warns him about the huge potential of Paul Phoenix, who almost defeated Kazuya. Nina Williams bursts into the conversation and mentions that Kazuya and Heihachi are the same trash, so Heihachi's secretary hastily changes the subject to avoid tension. Upon arriving at the Tekken arena, Jin meets with his grandfather and tells him that he is eagerly awaiting Ogre's presence to take revenge on him. Furthermore, it is revealed that Kazuya is Jin's father, as Jin asks his grandfather what happened to him after their fight in the Tekken tournament. However, his grandfather tells him to stop thinking about the past and focus on the present. The pre-tournament ceremony takes place, and Heihachi opens the ceremony by speaking in front of the millions and millions of spectators gathered to watch the tournament. Leroy Smith, one of the fighters, confronts Jin, telling him that he hates his grandfather and hopes to beat him up at the tournament to make a fool of Heihachi's honor. Jin meets with Nina and Paul to ask them what they know about Kazuya Mishima, but Nina again shows her dislike for this family and leaves the place. Paul explains to her that Kazuya is a wretch who is not satisfied with winning, but wants to torture and humiliate his rivals. In addition, he tells him that he witnessed the hellish fight between him and Heihachi, his father. Kazuya had no mercy on his father and fought as if possessed by a demon, even throwing Heihachi off a cliff. However, although everyone believed that Heihachi died in the fall, Heihachi returned to the next tournament and took revenge on Kazuya, beating the hell out of him. Before saying goodbye, Paul mentions again the rumor that Heihachi was the one who killed Kazuya. Because of this, Jin runs to ask his grandfather for explanations, and he admits that he was the one who killed Kazuya, as he possessed an infernal power and was cursed with an evil gene that took over his will during fights, which is why he was so strong and fearsome. He also reveals that this is what attracts Ogre to the fights. Jin was concentrating on his next fight until he is interrupted by his friend Ling, who reveals to him that he will be the first fighter and that his opponent will be Leroy Smith. Arriving at the arena, both fighters are introduced by the referee, and the opening bell unleashes the war between them. Leroy starts the fight by giving everything and taking the lead, so he is full of confidence and believes that Jin is a fraud. However, Jin stops joking around and starts to show Leroy that he is no match for someone like him, bringing him to his knees with just a few punches. Seeing that Leroy could barely withstand a percentage of his strength, Jin recommends him to surrender, but he denies it, so Jin gives him a fatal blow to the leg and knocks him out. In the next round, Ling faces Nina Williams in a duel that promises to be epic. The Waifus go all out, though at times it seems Ling just wants to show off to Jin what she's capable of. However, this seems to infuriate Nina, who violently throws herself on Ling and abruptly subdues her. This seemed to end the fight, but Ling leaves everyone with their mouths agape by pulling off a big move and knocking Nina out. After this, Jin goes to look for Leroy to see how his leg is, so Leroy realizes that Jin is not the same as the monstrous Heihachi, and tries to convince him that if Heihachi chose him to train him, it is only to fulfill his objectives, since he does not do anything unselfishly. Heihachi arrives at that precise moment and tells Jin that a scum like Leroy isn't even worth it, besides scolding him for wasting his time instead of mentally preparing himself to defeat Ogre. Jin's next fight is against Hwoarang, his rival and good friend. The two don't hold back one bit and give it everything they've got, showing the growth they've both had over the years. Hwoarang surprises Jin by giving him an extremely close fight, but Jin's strength is too much for any rival and ends up leaving his friend exhausted. Heihachi anxiously awaits Jin's final blow, but Jin lifts Hwoarang off the ground and invites him to dinner, as he is his friend, which provokes Heihachi's anger. The next day, Ling and King have a close and incredible fight, but unfortunately, the waifu loses. Afterwards, Jin goes to visit her to cheer her up, which further tightens the bond between the two. King and Paul fight for a pass to the finals and have a fierce confrontation and close fight, while Heihachi reveals to his grandson that the real King is dead, so the identity of this fighter is a mystery. The supposed King defeats Paul and advances to the finals. Heihachi is intercepted by Julia Chang, who tries to steal his talisman and obtain information about his mother's disappearance. Jin arrives on the scene and calms things down, telling his grandfather to let him handle the situation. Jin tries to explain to Julia that Heihachi only wants to use the talisman to save the world from Ogre, but she tells him that the culprit of Ogre's release is Heihachi himself, leaving Jin with more doubts than answers, so he offers to return the talisman once the tournament is over. Once and for all, the long-awaited tournament final begins, and Jin takes it very seriously, giving 101% to beat King. Obviously, King lives up to the match and gives Jin a more than worthy fight, but loses within minutes of the bout starting, as Jin literally waited for this moment for his entire life. However, Jin tells him to keep the reward money, as his goal is another one. After this, he goes to look for Heihachi, who was already in the combat arena ready to fight. Jin tells his grandfather that he already knows that he was the one who freed Ogre, and that his mother's death was because of him. Obviously, Jin takes the fight as if his life depended on it, since he knows that Heihachi won't hold back even a little bit. On the contrary, he fights as if he wanted to end his grandson's life. In fact, he carries out such a sickening flurry of attacks that he leaves Jin practically destroyed. However, he remembers his mother's words and stands up again, beating up his master using Kazama style instead of Mishima style. As he hits Heihachi furiously, Jin's eyes start to turn red, and the talisman summons Ogre. Ogre's presence frightens everyone and makes Heihachi smile, as Jin's anger is slowly unleashed against the beast. The fight between them breaks out and Jin gets a beating, but he manages to remember the teachings of the two most important masters he has had in his life, and starts to gain the upper hand by mixing both fighting styles. His eyes keep turning red and he gives a brutal flurry of attacks to Ogre, ending his life. He then insults Heihachi for all the misfortunes he has brought to the world. But the sky turns green, and Ogre comes back to life in a new and terrifying form. All the fighters work together to defeat the fearsome beast, but they are unable to defeat him, as he is literally on another level. However, when Ogre threatens the life of Jin's waifu, Jin remembers what Heihachi and Jun taught him about anger and weakness, so he awakens the demonic power he inherited from his father, and gives Ogre a tremendous beating, completely erasing his existence. Everyone congratulates Jin, as they can't believe what they have just seen, but Heihachi attacks him with a shot, arguing that he has just saved the world from a monster worse than Kazuya. However, although everything seemed to end in the most tragic way, Jin revives and transformed into his final demonic form and beats Heihachi to a pulp, leaving him on the verge of death. Hearing Ling's cry, Jin stops and leaves the place. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new anime recaps.